Thank you for staying until the last panel of this wonderful event. So first, before thanking all my panelists, I will have to ask you to forgive the French Minister of Finance for a few more minutes. We'll begin without him because he has to stay at the Senate, where there is a big debate right now on for French Loi Pacte. So it's a bit longer than expected. So he will join us at the end of the panel for a conclusive word. I'm keeping the seat. But until that, we decided not to keep you until too late tonight to do the debate with the three ministers who were here right now. So first of all, we were there last year at the same time, exact same time, exam date, 30th of January 2018, with almost the same panelists, because sometimes you have a change of government, but almost the same panelists. At this time, the conclusion was, let's make Europe great again. And of course, we focused on finance industry needs. Being at Paris Fintech Forum, we don't really treat with all the society issues. 1 year later, Brexit is sadly really at the corner. Let's say that last year, in the backstage, some of us could say, perhaps it won't happen. But right now, seems to be at the corner. Many political issues in our different countries. I won't say what you see on TV for France, but in Belgium, we have some stuff sometime. In every country, we have issues. So European elections are this year. And election could be complex for all our different countries. Again, let's focus on what European country, on Europe, as a community, not as a country against another country, but can, should do to support the digital transformation for the finance industry and the rise of fintechs. So we have 45 minutes together. Don't believe this counter, which is including Mr. Maire when he will arrive. So I will ask exactly the same question to all of you, and I will ask you to be quite brief, let's say in a political world, 2 to 3 minutes for your answer. But of course, if you don't like the question and want some time to debate together, feel free. First of all, I will just ask you to present yourself, and then I will ask my question, one by one, please.
I'm Vilius Šapoka. I'm Minister of Finance from Lithuania.
Pierre, I'm the Minister of Finance of Luxembourg, who has been reappointed after elections, and we're lucky to have continuity in Luxembourg. So basically the same government as we had 5 years ago, against all odds, we're back again, and we're happy to be here.
Somehow I feel I need to congratulate Pierre, otherwise he would not have said what he just said about being reappointed. I'm Alexander de Croo. I'm the Belgian Minister of Development. I'm also of Finance, and I'm also Minister of Development Cooperation, which is a very different domain.
So I will begin by you for the most difficult question for someone who has just been appointed, but you were already in the government before, so you can speak for the government. In the past 12 months, since the last panel, when Mr. Van Overveld was there, what your government has done to promote the rise of new technology in finance industry and foster the fintech development?
Well, I think that today, if you look at elements that help the development of fintech, you have to look quite broad, because the definition of the financial industry is, especially thanks to fintech, becoming much more blurry than what it used to be. One of the things, for example, we've been quite successful in innovating is at digital identity management. We all know that being able to establish in a secure way the fact that online you are the person who you actually claim to be is a very important element in digital and in fintech. And we did it in a kind of innovative way. We actually opened the market for it. It's not a government monopoly anymore to do it. And there is an initiative which is called It's Me. And It's Me is a consortium of four Belgian banks and 3 telecom operators and the Belgian government that basically links your electronic identity card with your smartphone. It is a successful thing because the banks use it for their authentication activities that you use with e-banking. But we see that especially in blockchain-related activities and other fintech-related activities, it's an important building block, which I think makes it quite unique in Europe today, because it's a private private solution. Besides that, we have, I think, like in other countries, a community which has been built, which is Beehive. And Beehive brings together all the players from the banking, financial services, and insurance side, but also the market infrastructure players in Belgium, which are quite important, with SWIFT and Euroclear being present in Brussels. Also, Mastercard having their headquarters, European headquarters in Brussels, and that has been quite instrumental in especially sharing things. I think that. In a good European way, being at the center of Europe, we've tried to share as much as possible, not just in Belgium, but try to create a European exchange of experience. By the way, a message I have to give from Beehive, which is that platform, is that after this debate, there is a Beehive drink to which you're all invited, and it's actually at the same location where the closing drink is, which is Frog and Underground or something like that. So if you're not convinced about Belgium as a fintech place of investment, please come have a drink at least.
That's what I love with some different countries. Ministers doing promotion sales. I will ask my next year to promote my Paris Fintech Night. We'll see if it works. So good work, Wim, to convince your minister to do that. Your turn, Pierre. What have you done the last 12 months beside the party with Beehive? I mean,
yes, in fact, we have a very good relationship with Beehive. Our Luxembourg House of Fintech Loft is working very closely with it. What have we done in the last year? I think fintech has become a self-evidence and a must. You cannot avoid it at every corner, and congratulations for the success of this 4th edition. It's amazing how many people are here, and for us it's the 2nd time, and we're thrilled to be here. As we had elections, we decided to give the digital economy, including fintech, even more visibility. So our Prime Minister is in charge of ICT and the digitalization of the economy. I think that tells it all. Digital economy and fintech is going to be present in all the things we do. So it's a transversal, a horizontal issue. That's, I think, the first thing we've done. We have, second, developed the Luxembourg House of Fintech, which is a public-private partnership in the same way as you have in Beehive. I have good and bad news. The good news is it's full after 2 years. So the bad news is that normally nobody can get in anymore. So I've told all those that have been successful and need too much space to go somewhere else, because they are growing and they don't need to be in this accelerator or nursing place as it is. Last thing, I think that we still lack a digital single market in the European Union. We still lack a way forward in this field, so that we really have the EU single market playing its full role in this context. We are trying to do that in the Capital Markets Union, but we're making too slow a progress. But my appeal is, let's do that. It's in the best interest of all of us to reach out. And when you see that single market is working so well in many different areas, let's also make sure it's the case.
So sorry to ask, because we are not all specialists of that. What are the main challenges? What is so slow for this domain?
Well, as it always is in Europe, you have to find the common denominator and make sure that the policies we devise at EU level are efficient and also open enough. What very few people have noticed is that the Brexit issue is sometimes used to build fences around the European Union. If we want to be successful, we need to do two things in Europe, is to unite more or less to have a single market, but not build walls around the EU single market. Because if we want to export our goods and services to the rest of the world, we must be also open to the goods and services of the rest of the world.
Mr. Minister, the same for you.
So first of all, let me thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here on stage. And I'll start with a very short message about our interventions. Sooner or later in this discussion, you'll realize that each of us will say between lines that my country is the best. But it's not about the competition between us. Our core competitors are in Asia, in the United States, and it's about sharing and learning from each other. So I'll start with about sharing, and I'll share my dream. And that dream is about my country. I come from Lithuania, and I want my country to become Litechnia. It means high-tech country. My colleagues will absolutely understand that if you want to do something good for your country, so you better be very quick. So you need to shift to top gear, like this. And what we did in Lithuania last year, we shaped a strategy which is named STIG. S stands for Start, Technovate, Invest, and Grow. So in Lithuania, it's very easy to start your business in the area of fintech. Our central bank, which is at the same time a single supervisor, provides newcomers program where companies can get consultancy on any kind, compliance issues, etc. Also, we have regulatory sandbox regime for blockchain. Talking about technovation, it's very important to have in mind not only to open opportunities, but also to manage risks. So Lithuania is ranked #1 in the world in the area of cybersecurity. Nowadays, if you want to do something with high tech, you should take into account cybersecurity risks. Also, in Lithuania, we have the most generous tax incentives for high-tech industry. Indeed, it works. I can assure you. Invest. In Lithuania, we decided to become one of the most business-friendly countries. Now we are 14th in the world according to doing business, the 4th in the European Union, and we are not going to stop. Our goal is top 5 in the world. Talking about regulatory and supervisory practices, it is always true that supervisors are lagging behind the market. And in order to solve that problem, we set fintech development plan, which we review on a constant basis in order to be alongside with the market. Talking about investments. Also, very important tax incentives are in place in Lithuania. And if you want to grow, it's a great opportunity in Lithuania. Talking about the growth, sustainable growth. In the period of 10 years, Lithuania proved to be very successful, and according to GDP per capita growth, Lithuania now is #1 in OECD. In those industries which are high-tech driven, it's very important to have growing talent pool. So if somebody wants to get a master degree in fintech, in Lithuania we have a few universities which provide that opportunity. And also, a very interesting fact.
If you take all your time right now, I won't ask you any more questions. But by the way,
last but not least, so in Lithuania we have the most educated society in Europe. And when we talk about gender equality, I'm proud to say that women in Lithuania is the most educated in the world. More than 60% of women have higher education.
So if I may, you already answered 4 of your questions. So you won't bite me if I don't come back too often to you. But by the way, I have a question for all of you, but think to your answer, because you just began your speech by what is important is not one country against another, but you did the rest of the speech saying that Lithuania is the best place to be. So I just want to ask you, to all of you, what did you do for, knowing we are in a Brexit time, for Europe to be the best place to be? I come back to you at the end because I'm afraid to take the 15 minutes. So I ask you that first, Pierre. You have been re-elected, as you said, but you were in charge in the last year. What did you do this year, which was difficult for plenty of subjects, to make sure Europe, as you promised on this stage last year, be a great place again? So.
Well, I think you mentioned the word Brexit. We were one of the countries that had a little bit of different line of action by saying, let's not burn the bridges with the United Kingdom. And let's continue to cooperate, even tomorrow after Brexit, in whatever form it will take place. We will continue to do business with the United Kingdom, and especially with London, which is the largest financial center in the world. Now, if our goal would be to punish London, we will shoot ourselves in the foot. So let's keep the cooperation going in the same way as we do business with Japan, with China, with the US. We will continue to do business with the City of London. And so that cooperative approach has proved extremely useful. Lots of companies in insurance, in asset management, fintech have chosen Luxembourg. But the key point is that we stay open for business. No borders at the, or fences at the limit of the European Union. Point number one. Point number two, regulatory issues. Everybody says it's best to have a regulation or legislation that is technology neutral. Still, we've seen countries, including France, for example, and now including mine, where we think we have to give people the security and safety if they use, for example, the blockchain, if they use different ways of delivering financial services. We're not doing it at a national level. This is typically something that should be done at EU level.
My question is, did you have some bilateral discussion with other countries in order that, because in front, Mr. Lemaire is not there, but I'm sure he will speak about it. We have a new law for ICOs, for blockchain and so on. I'm sure you have. But did you begin bilateral discussion for this kind of interesting initiative, being at European level and not just in one country, another one?
No, we are pushing this all the time. How do you want to solve the ICO issue if not at European level? ICOs, initial coin offerings, or other issues.
Identity issues.
Identity issues, anti-money laundering issues. The only way we can solve this in a satisfactory manner is the European way. Now, in many of these fields, there are initiatives. In some, there aren't initiatives. And unfortunately, or fortunately, sometimes we're lagging behind, sometimes we're not. Take sustainable finance. We are ahead of all the others. There's the action plan of the Commission. I would wish that in other areas like fintech, we would have an action plan. And once we achieve to do that in Europe, we are very convincing, because then we set the standards for 500 million consumers. So on the one hand, we're slower than a country alone, but once we achieve the result, we're better. Take investment fund industry, we were the first ones to establish common rules, and Europe is a leader in the field. So I'm not at all pessimistic. One has to be a little bit patient, but as you put it quite rightly, and as Vilius put it quite rightly, we need to have the right framework so that our companies can build the single market and be competitive internationally.
Alexander, do you share the same point of view?
Well, first of all, because you started in the previous question about your ambition to make Europe great. I think we will make Europe great in being united in all our diversity. And the diversity of Europe is often seen as a disadvantage. I think it's a great advantage. And obviously in Belgium we are Europe in small because we have that diversity, and we've always learned how to leverage that diversity. And to the question, I mean, which of the three of us is the best?
Which is not my question.
I think, but it's kind of an underlying.
Vilius answered that question,
underlying
but it was
element.
not my question.
But I think that we're probably each of us great in certain domains, and I'm sure there's a domain where Lithuania is the place to be, and you should not be in Belgium, and exactly the same for Luxembourg. And probably we have a few domains where we are better. Europe is big enough to support that. I mean, we are more than 500 million inhabitants. That's the side of the world with the biggest purchasing power and so on. So there is space for all of us to be excellent niche player in our domain. Still, if you want that, and because all of us are actually smaller countries, if I can call it that way, you need us to be able to have Europe as our home market and to reduce as much as possible all those hinderings that you have in considering our market a home market. And that is quite broad, actually. I mean, related to fintech, data localization laws, which we have seen pop up all over Europe. Let's be clear, this is just pure protectionism. And it's bigger countries putting laws on just forcing the smaller countries to not being able to operate from a small, from a certain place. And there, from the Belgian side, we've always been pushing those things. It's giving smaller countries the possibility to be specialized in something, by definition means that you take away all those borders that we still have in the digital single market.
By the way, when you speak of size of countries, I remind everybody that in fintech industry, the only big one is UK, still today. When you look at the fintech we have here for 2 days, 32% went from UK. And after we have plenty of others, and Belgium and Luxembourg are quite well represented, of course. Lithuanian also a bit less, but size of country, but still. And France quite the same, but you don't have big giant besides UK today. So that leads me to the question, what do you think of the impact of Brexit, which is just here, on the European finance industry? Know that 2 months, so all of you.
So let me start by answering a question if Lithuania is the best. No, we are not. Already. No, we are not.
Don't do it again.
We are number 2 destination for fintechs after the UK. Of course, Brexit is both opportunity and a challenge. And but of course, we should bear in mind that the UK is probably leaving the European Union, but they are not leaving Europe. They are credible partners in many areas, in security, in science, and in financial industry. So I fully agree that we should not burn bridges. We should strengthen our cooperation in any case, because it creates value for the whole Europe.
Thank you. Pierre, is it, because you spoke of those bridges, is it not dangerous another way to stay too close? I mean, they don't want to stay, so can we give still the same capacities, or what is keeping bridges open, in fact?
Well, at least it's WTO rules, to make a very quick answer, but there's probably smart ways of establishing a cooperation with the United Kingdom along the lines of what we have done with Switzerland. So I have very precise ideas how we can rebuild bridges or keep bridges. And in fact, just if I may, Laurent, the way you asked the question is already intending, well, as they're leaving, they must be punished a little bit. And I think that
I'm here to provoke you.
Yeah, that's good. You're in your role. And I just want to say, let's really forget that. It sounds a bit like private life. There's a divorce, it's bad. It has to be negative. We have to punish. We must really look beyond that. And I think we will, all of us. And on top of it, it's in our best interest. What we should avoid is that the City of London drifts away into the Atlantic. And we've seen in the context of Brexit, to be quite outspoken about it, there's been many winners short term, because many companies had to relocate only partly, to have substance on the continent. They went to Paris, they went to Frankfurt for investment banking, they came to Luxembourg for insurance and asset management, they went to Amsterdam for international credit, they went to Belgium for some insurance, and so on. So everybody is a little bit a winner. But that's only a part of the puzzle. It's short term. How do we see all this in the long term? And so let's make sure that London City continues to feel attracted to Europe and works with us. Otherwise, they will find other partners. So I was in Hong Kong last week and in Japan. They're very worried about this because London is their main partner. So they want to understand how can we work together in the future. And the worst message we can make as Europeans is to say, okay, forget London now. Concentrate on us. This is exactly the wrong message you want to make. And let's build on the bridges they have, for example, with Hong Kong. Excellent example. Let's try to work together on it.
With Australia also, and so the point. Your opinion?
Well, there's a high degree of imprevisibility on what is going to happen. And if this would be a Netflix series, we would be on the sitting here in tension for a new cliffhanger. What I can say is that out of the three of us, we are definitely the most impacted because the UK is our third or fourth trading partner. Now, let's say there's a hard Brexit on March 29th. Trade and relations with the United Kingdom are not going to stop. They will continue. Probably it will be a bit difficult, uncomfortable at the start, but it will continue, and we should do everything to make trade as smooth as possible. I hope also on the other side of the sea. I think that it is in all our best interests to keep the ties as close as possible, and I think that on the short term, actually there will be much more traveling between the UK and Europe than before, because from what I've heard, especially in financial industries, some activities will move, but you can move activities, but you cannot transplant the brains. So actually a lot of people will actually be moving to any city on this side of the continent and commuting between the UK and here. So I think that in the beginning you will see an intensification and more intense relations physically and intellectually. The question is how it develops afterwards. I am definitely not in a position of punishing. I think what this has showed over the last 2 years is that there is an incredible degree of unity between the 27 remaining countries on how to deal with this, not out of a revenge feeling, but more of a feeling that, I mean, the internal market, the rules that we have set is something that we think are very, very valuable. Now, I'm quite sure a lot of things might swing in the next weeks, as we've seen it in previous weeks.
Let's stay positive on that. Thank you for this part on Brexit, which is not easy in an unstable situation. Let's go back more on a classical question in Europe, specifically on regulation side. This morning we had a panel with American people telling us we have 50 states, 50 regulation, and so on. We have the chance to have one Europe, at least for agreement in many fields, but with plenty of specific regulation and specific body to give an agreement, for example, for new banks and so on. We heard, or we can read in some media, that some country can someone be more flexible or even considered as too flexible on some subject. Could be banks, could be asset management, could be so on. What is your opinion on that? Do you think we have a level playing field in continental Europe for that subject? And if not, what should we do? Perhaps, if you want.
So
not 5 minutes, huh?
10. So I fully agree what was said, that with the challenges which are more global, we cannot solve and cannot cope with such things as money laundering or cybersecurity and many other issues by just our own efforts. We need quick solutions at EU level with very quick reactions to new phenomena such as ICO, STO, anti-money laundering system, and things like that. So, and we should find a way how to increase the speed at EU level coping with those issues, because we need the same level playing field, we need the same coverage and management of risks, because otherwise, if we just work on with our own efforts, it won't help in global competition. I mean with China, with the United States. Therefore, we should find a solution how to increase the speed of reviewing financial services regulatory and supervisory framework.
Pierre? I like the way you ask questions, Laurent, because they always intend things that are under the sea level I have to tell you that...
As if we never get questions asked this way in the rest of our lives.
Thank you, Alexander.
C'est la vie, no problem. No, but just to say that very firmly and thoroughly, we have, for example, doubled the number of people at our supervisor for the bank. They're now getting close to 1,000 people. And that's commensurate to the huge size of our financial center. But I can assure you, our regulator has one task: apply and implement EU regulations to the full. And that's the only instruction I give to them. In fact, I'm not allowed to give them instructions because they're independent. I say, you make sure that EU rules are applied in Luxembourg. Number two, there are countries that do gold plating and add things on top of EU regulations and make themselves less competitive. Well, that's their call. Obviously, we try to avoid that in Luxembourg. And point number three, in some directives, in some regulations, there are options. And we are asked as countries to choose options. And what do we do in such cases in Luxembourg? We speak with you, with the customers, with the clients. We understand what are your needs, and then we'll try to take the smartest option, which is foreseen in the directive. But definitely, we could not afford, and we do not want to go subpar. And then last point, in fintech, for example, we have applied a rule that few countries have done. We say fintech companies have to comply with the same rules as traditional companies. We have refused to do a sandbox. We have refused to make a specific regulation for fintech. You are in banking services and you're a fintech company, you need to have a banking license. You are in payment services and you are a fintech, you have to comply with PSD2. So very few countries have been so transparent and I would say straight to the point. And you know the best thing, if I stay with fintech, which is our topic here, many companies, many fintech companies have come to Luxembourg for a very specific reason, because we give a license. Some countries, for activities where you need a license in Luxembourg, would allow them to operate without a license. And they choose to come to Luxembourg because they get a license. So contrary to what many people think, that companies systematically choose a country where it's more easygoing or there's no license, fintech companies say, I want recognition, because if I have a license, I can show the license, and I can tell you they're very proud of the license they get in Luxembourg.
Same question.
I would continue on that. I think that we are in times where fintech is mainstreaming, and if you want mainstreaming to happen in a good way, then confidence of the consumer, confidence of the user is something you build up step by step, but something that you can lose in a split of a second. So having the possibility of obtaining that regulatory certainty, I think indeed is a big asset. Now, I would plead here on the European level, as much as possible, get to common rules. I'm not a fan of giving options. I'm not a fan of saying, look, this is what we do, but you can deviate from it, because then you get some kind of competition on the downward side of regulation. I think that is not what we want to compete on. We should compete within the same rules and then find our own ways based on talent and based on other things. Because if we say fintech is mainstreaming, what we've learned from the financial crisis of a few years ago is that we are very much interlinked. And the European financial system is very, very much interlinked. So we cannot avoid to have accidents happen in some place because there was a competition on regulation. We've always been pushing for not giving options and not having country-based modifications that you can allow.
Thank you very much for this frank answer. Another subject you all mentioned in your answers were ICO. We had a question in the preparation for that. Did you do specific things in the past 12 years to face that phenomenon, which is a bit less right now, but I mean, during the year it was a big discussion. Can you elaborate in 1 minute each what if you did something on that subject, perhaps Pierre?
Two things on ICO. That's definitely an issue where we need to have a European regulation. anything else makes no sense. We have European Central Bank, you have a banking union, you have a common currency in 19 countries. I mean, those 3 countries have a common currency. There's only one way to do that, is together. The second thing I want to say is that what has happened with Bitcoin is very worrying in the sense that Bitcoin has become an object of speculation. Now, I remember people worrying that the dollar or the euro can deviate by 1 or 2 cents per day, and that was not stable. Now, with the Bitcoin, we saw deviations by thousands of dollars in a week. Now, obviously, that has been a perversion of what you expect from any currency. So I hope for what will happen at European level here is that and I hope that we will have virtual currencies in the future that are well organized, that it gives stability and not instability, so that customers who like these payment services, which like these virtual currencies, can use them in a safe framework.
So talking about crypto assets, so my opinion is that we cannot use the approach wait and see. Of course, now different countries are coping with this phenomena by their own, but of course it's not a solution, and we need European solution, we need global standards of this phenomena. We cannot ignore it. And of course, if we look to the future, currently, if we calculate new ICOs, we will be surprised, as it was said, that the importance is now definitely not as it used to be, but in the future we can see the development of security tokens. Also to mention that everybody can have a different approach towards Bitcoin, but thanks to Bitcoin that we learned a lot about blockchain technology, which is now applied in various ways across very different sectors. So I think it's a huge opportunity for business models and as well as public service to make it more effective and efficient.
Alexander, do you want to add something?
Maybe let's define it as crypto assets. I would think our regulator has honestly been actually quite conservative on that domain, and I mean we have no problem with saying that. Also because if we see what we are developing, what our strength is in Belgium, it's mostly based on the activities we have in market infrastructure. I mean, we are good because in domains which are related to what Euroclear is doing, to what SWIFT is doing, and so on. So this is the crypto assets class is not something where we have a lot of work in. We have a lot of success in cybersecurity and so on. So I think that I agree that it should rather be regulated on the European level, and that some countries are maybe experimenting with it. I'm not against it, but I would at least be sure that there are basic ways of because in the end, it starts to get very close to consumer protection, and we have been extremely stringent on consumer protection in consumer credit and so on. Then I would imagine that in cryptocurrencies and crypto assets, yes, you need some space for innovation, but space for innovation with people who actually know what they are confronted with.
Thank you.
Just maybe to rebound on what Alexander has just said, for example, our regulator gave out 2 warnings last year on cryptocurrencies, just to tell the consumer there are risks involved. That's the least we can do, and we can do that on a national basis, obviously. But that's a very limited action, and it feels like we need more than that.
Thank you. A last question before Finance Minister of France joined us for a conclusive. You mentioned you traveled recently in China, and I'm sure all of you go in Asia and in the States. You can see they have giants in fintech industry. We don't have giants. Even our big one here are still not giants. What do you think Europe should do in the coming months or year? We need some time, a bit of time, but not to be totally dead in a few years, faced to these giants.
I think this is a very good question. I can shock you a little bit here also for the purpose of the discussion. When you go to China, you see there's a couple of players there. I'm not going to use the names. They're very well known. They have 600, 700 million customers. They can use that data as they want, and they can build business cases on that data that nobody is capable of doing. It gives them a competitive advantage. Now, do not misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we should not have data protection. In fact, we're at the forefront in Europe in data protection. But let's not overdo it, because if it's one example, there's many others. So how to find the right balance in using data and protecting personal life and privacy, and how to allow our companies to grow and use what is the new fuel of the economy. Data is key. And in order to achieve that in Europe, we have now, typically European, we have some protection, and we don't have the digital single market. So we've made progress on areas that limit, to a certain extent, our competitiveness, and we're lagging behind on issues like a digital single market, having common rules so that we can have bigger companies coming to the forefront. So it's not an easy one, and so let's not jeter le bébé avec l'eau du bain. What I'm advocating is we need a strategy that we agree probably all together so that we allow our companies to grow.
Same question.
This domain is a domain in which actually there's a lot of activity in Belgium, which is RegTech and data governance. And we have, for example, yesterday there was an announcement of a Belgian company called Colibra, who's become a unicorn now, who has a 1 billion valuation specifically in data governance. And obviously the proximity to the European decision place in Brussels helps in building an expertise there. And it touches also on something which, because you talked about how to build champions. And it touches on a broader discussion, which is not specifically fintech related. There are more and more voices in Europe that say, well, the anti-competition authorities in Europe very often take a market definition, which is a European market definition, and then prohibit, for example, certain mergers based on the fact that there would be a market concentration in Europe. And some people say, well, that is actually limiting us in the creation of champions, of companies that would be champions on the worldwide level. I think it is a discussion to be had because you are more and more moving with trading blocks who create an environment where those big regional champions have the space to be created. But let's do it in a sensible way. I mean, I still want the European competition authorities to function, and they've been actually quite good at avoiding market concentration and so on. I think because one is not opposite to the other. You can also become a regional or a worldwide champion by creating a big market where a lot of things can happen. And they're related to data. I know there's been a lot of cursing about the implementation of GDPR, but in the end, GDPR is a condition, at least in the European philosophy, to be able to do interesting things with data. If we would not have GDPR, it would actually be harder to do interesting things with it, at least in a way that can be trusted. And what you see is that Europe is actually setting the standards to a lot of other places in the world. Maybe not China, but a lot of other places are looking at GDPR as kind of the gold standard. And I think it is something that it's a role that we should play more and more. But in an, I would say, a bit more an assertive way, which means someone wants to operate in Europe, you are very welcome to operate here, but along our rules. And you want to operate here, that's great, but we also want to operate on your side. And there I think that we have not enough used that clout that we have. As I said, this is the biggest market in the world, by far the biggest purchasing power. we are open for business and open for trade and open for investment, but we would hope that others are following suit.
Thank you.
If I may just
Mr.
1
Maire,
second
yeah.
to say that I completely agree with what Alexander has said. Now, for example, the good news that Alipay has chosen to come to Luxembourg, a large player, but obviously they will operate under the European laws. So I agree with you. You say it's golden standard. I would say it's a silver standard.
Vilius, please, in 1 minute.
Yeah, just 1 minute.
But really.
Okay.
So now we are talking about a quite short-term effect, but if we talk about a long run, that competition between continents is far more important in the way that if we squeeze creativity with new technology at the very beginning, I'll give you an example. If we do not employ artificial intelligence in Europe, artificial intelligence from other continents will employ us. So that's a key message. We should not squeeze creativity. We should be brave implementing new technologies that support the arrival of new business models, higher value for consumers. And new technologies, of course, should be, we should take care and manage risks. But of course, we should track what is being done in other continents. And just last year, Lithuania became China plus 16 FinTech Coordination Center, and we will help in this respect to learn new tendencies in China.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased now to welcome Mr. Le Maire, who just arrived. Thank you very much. Please don't move. Thank you for joining us. I will ask you to do the conclusive part of this panel. We discussed of everything that was discussed before together, so I think you know a bit what we mentioned on that panel. Thank you for joining, and Croo is yours.
Thank you, and good evening to you all. I'm really very pleased to be here to conclude these 2 days, I think, of debates on financial new technologies and on the development of fintechs. I would like, of course, to say a special thank to my colleagues and warmly welcome for coming to Paris today and for their contribution to this discussion. Alexander de Croo, the Minister of Finance of Belgium, Vilius Šapoka, the Minister of Finance of Lithuania, and Pierre Gramegna, with whom I'm working very hard at the Eurogroup and at the ECOFIN. Thank you, all of you, for being here. All the topics you just discussed, I mean ICOs, blockchain, peer-to-peer financing, crowdfunding, are really critical for the future of finance, for the future of our economy, and for European citizens' daily life. That's why I really think that this is of utmost importance to have that kind of debate in Paris. We, I think, all share the same conviction. There can't be a powerful economy without a powerful financial industry. And you know I'm the French finance minister. This is something new to have the French finance minister explaining that he strongly believes in the necessity of having a strong finance industry to have a strong economy as such. And there can't be a powerful financial industry without innovative technologies in finance and fintechs leaders. Fintechs, for me, are bringing really new opportunities in finance, which we want to seize and develop. Opportunities, first of all, for investors and savers, which access better, cheaper, and more transparent services. Opportunities for companies, which access new funding opportunities. Crowdfunding, of course, but also peer-to-peer financing or initial coin offerings. Opportunities also for every citizen who can track their finances, be better advised, or simply get access to new financial services. It is not only true in European countries, but also in many developing countries where fintechs help people access helpful financial services thanks to SMS cash payments and transfers, online microcredit applications, for example. So I strongly believe that fintechs are simply changing finance for the better, for companies, but also for every citizen. They are bringing creative, useful solutions for our economy at a cheaper price for consumers. And they are creating a more competitive environment that will benefit to all. And I insist on that word, all. I would like really those fintechs to benefit all, to benefit everybody, included, I want to insist on that point because this is at the heart also of the French policy and of the policy led by Emmanuel Macron, including the poorest countries, including women in the poorest countries. You know, I invited Melinda Gates in Paris a few days ago to explain to us what she's doing with her new association for financial inclusiveness, and I really think that what Melinda Gates and her foundation is doing for the inclusion of the poorest women of the world, for the banking inclusion, is something great related to our debate on fintechs. That is why we are working hard to make Paris become the best place to innovate in the financial industry. And I can assure you, we are succeeding and we are fully determined to succeed. We will do it in 3 ways. The first point on which we are building our willingness to make Paris the best place to innovate in the financial industry is the strengthening of our financial ecosystem. Paris is already a great financial center with great talents and a strong corporate environment. But we have greater ambitions for our financial industry, which will become a flagship of French economy. For 18 months, we have been implementing the most ambitious economic reforms of the last decades to attract more assets and more talents in France. We have built a positive environment for innovation by maintaining our tax incentive for research and development and by launching a 10 billion euro fund for research on disruptive technologies. And as my European colleagues know, I really would like that French fund to be at one stage a European fund with not only 10 billion euro, but maybe 100 billion euro to fund disruptive innovation. Because if we want to be successful in that race for new technologies in Europe, if we want to face the requirements and the competition with both the United States on the one side and China, we need to put more funding on innovation, especially on disruptive innovation. We have completely redefined our capital tax system to make it simple and attractive through a single 30% flat tax on capital gains. It is a clear support to our growing venture capital market, which is now Europe's second largest. Finally, we have set Paris as the best European place for financial services. We improved the tax environment for financial services and expatriates in Paris. The quality of the French regulators and their track record in recent crises is undisputed, and Paris was already home to the European Securities and Markets Authority, and we will welcome the European Banking Authority as of April 2019. The second pillar of our strategy for finance is a smarter regulatory framework encouraging the development of innovation. France had a bad reputation in regulation. We were seen as the country in Europe where regulation came too soon and was heavier than necessary. This is not completely wrong, as we have a strong legal culture. But we have taken bold measures to change our way of regulating, especially in the financial sector, because we were aware of the necessity of changing that regulation. First, we took the commitment to stop gold-plating EU regulation, which was really the specialty in the French administration, the idea of having the best standards and gold-plating EU regulation for the sake of having the best regulation and with, as a counterpart, really hurdles, big hurdles for the development of our economy. EU regulation, of course, is not always perfect, and there are plenty of good reasons to improve it. Let's have a look at the rules on competition, for instance. I'm thinking of the project of merger between Alstom and Siemens. I strongly believe that we have to change the rules of competition in the EU. But small improvements of EU regulations at national level increase also the regulatory burden for all businesses. It is a competitive disadvantage in an open market, such as the EU financial single market. This is why we have passed into law a package of measures to reduce this regulatory burden and to ensure financial players that they will have the same rules as their EU competitors. This is one of the key improvements of the Pact Bill, which is currently discussed in the French Senate. Second, we are developing smarter regulatory framework for the financial sector, which let more space to innovation and to voluntary initiatives. The best example of that, and this is really one of my very strong commitments to the financial world, is that we are doing on blockchain technologies. I really believe that blockchain has the potential to be one of the major technological breakthroughs of this century. It is a complete overhaul on the way we manage data and bring trust and confidence in our economies. It tells a lot about the feeling of distrust we encounter in Western societies, especially the politicians. People tell us they better trust a mutually shared authority among numerous people than a unique institutional authority. This is a total overhaul of the way we are thinking authority, thinking the possibility of implementing decisions. It is basically the same with crypto assets. For this reason, some people are rejecting this technology. In France, I want to be very clear, we see blockchain as a key opportunity. That's why we made the choice to create a tailored, adjusted regulatory framework to promote innovation through blockchain technologies while preserving confidence for savers and investors. And this is the key to me for a fine regulation. You have to find the right balance between freedom on one side and confidence on the other side. If you just have freedom, you run the risk of losing confidence. But if you have a too strong regulatory framework, you run the risk of losing the power of freedom. First, France was among the first countries to give a legal status to the distributed ledger technology. In 2017, we allowed the issuance and the registration of financial securities on the blockchain. And through that Pact Bill, we are creating an unprecedented framework for initial coin offerings and crypto asset intermediaries. We will allow these market participants to register at the Financial Market Authority on a voluntary basis. And I'm insisting on that key point, which is the link with the right balance between freedom and confidence. If you want to have the allowance and the support of the Financial Market Authority, you can get a green light from the AMF, but if you don't want to have it, this is your choice. You can do what you want. Those those decisions will be registered on a white list, which will bring more confidence to investors and consumers, while providing significant leeway to all blockchain actors to innovate and create new services. The last pillar is European cooperation. And that's why, once again, I'm really very grateful to my European friends to be here today, because I strongly believe that if we want to succeed in the fintechs, we really need to gather the European effort, the relevant scale to invest and to innovate in the financial industry is a European one. Unlike American fintechs, European fintechs suffer from one key difficulty, which is market fragmentation. And we need to really alleviate that difficulty. To ensure that our fintechs become European and global players, we need an ambitious and adaptive European legal framework in the field of fintech. That's really a key if we really want to be at the same level as the United States today and China tomorrow. The Payment Service Directive 2 was a milestone to establish a sound and secure EU-wide payment market. But European authorities need to step up on payments. We run the risk of being otherwise outdistanced by our competitors in the US and in China. Europe also needs, and we are working very hard on that with my European counterparts, a true capital markets union and a banking union to help startups raise larger amounts of capital. I'm really fed up with that situation in which our startups, which are succeeding, are obliged to go to the US to find the right funding they need to scale up. That's really not the solution on which we want to build the fintech and our new economy. Just 3 figures. In 2018, venture capital investment represented $100 billion in the US, $81 billion in China, and $21 billion in Europe. This is not enough. And this is the clear evidence that we need now to build that true capital markets union and the banking union to have the right size to help our startup to find the right funding to develop and to scale up. France and Europe cannot be leaders in the fintech industry if we do not develop massively the European venture capital markets. France will come up in the coming month with ambitious proposals to further integrate our single capital market and make life easier for fintechs in Europe, especially in the payment industry. These are the very short remarks I wanted to make on that key question of fintechs. Once again, I really want to thank everybody for being here. I strongly believe that the key of the development of our economy for the 21st century will be based on the development of fintechs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. And of course, I thank all of you for joining us today and adapting to this change of panel due to enforcing circumstances. Thank you very much for doing the conclusion. And thank you all of you for being there for the 4th edition of the Paris Fintech Forum. And we'll wait for you next year, 28th and 29th of January 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you.